Hi, third grade Falcons. It's Mrs. DeShields, and this week we're going to talk about area. Area is going to be what measures the inside space of something. Okay, next week we're going to talk about perimeter that measures the outside space, but this week we're going to talk about area. We're going to review area and the space inside of something. So if we're thinking about area and perimeter as a room, area is going to measure the floor. Okay, if you're measuring a yard, area is going to measure the grass. Okay, it's going to measure what's inside of the space. The formula for area is length times width. Now you can use that if you have a rectangle or a square, but if you have an irregular shape, you can go in and you can actually count the square units. Okay, so we're going to talk about that one first. So here, I've got a variety of different shapes. So I'm not going to be able to necessarily use the length times width, or at least not easily and effectively. But what I can do is I can count my square units. So here, I see each unit is one piece. So I've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, I have 4 square units. Now, when I'm talking about area, my units are going to be square. So if I'm looking at an item that is measured in inches, my answer would be square inches. If I'm measuring an item in centimeters, it would be square centimeters. When I don't know, I'm going to call it units, square units. Okay? So it can be as simple as just counting the square units. For B, 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, 4 square units. But you'll notice, even though my area is the same in A and B, my shapes are very different. Okay, so your shapes can take different shapes. Your figures can take different shapes and still use the same amount of area. Now, C is an interesting one because if you'll notice, it doesn't include the whole square. I've got 1/2 and 1/2. So if I have 2 halves together, that together equals 1. And then I have 1/2 and 1/2, that together equals 1. So even though I'm in 4 different boxes, it's not the full box. So my area here is 2 square units because 1/2 and 1/2 makes 1, 1/2 and 1/2 makes another 1. So be real careful there. In order to count square units, the entire square must be completed. Okay, down to D. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 square units. Now, if it's an instance where you can actually go in and mark like I'm doing, do it. Okay? It helps you to keep track of it. Even better would be to go through and number it. Okay, it's going to be easier to keep track. If you get bigger and more involved, it's going to be easier if you go through and number it. Okay, looking at our next one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, remember, my area is in square units. So the area for figure E is 7 square units. If you just leave it at 7, that's not quite right. You need to include square units. Okay, for F, one more time, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to count. Super easy, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 what? Square units. Now again, if this said each square equals 1 inch, then I would have to change this to 6 square inches. Okay, so you have to make sure that you are reading the key, okay, just like you would on anything else. Okay, so now we're going to look at these different figures. Each of them is a rectangle, and each of them is broken into squares. Now, I could go in and count each individual square, but maybe when you look at them, they remind you of something, and hopefully they do. What they should remind you of is an array. Okay, an array is a tool that we use to solve multiplication problems. So if you look back to the ones we did on the last page when they're all different shaped and aren't regular, we can't use those as an array. But if you look at these rectangles, or if you looked at a square, we can, and we can make this a multiplication problem instead of counting each individual square, or even better, as a check. Okay, we could do it both ways to confirm our answer. So remember, in an array, you count the length and the width. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. So this array shows me 4 times 4. And I can solve that to find the area of this particular shape. So 4 times 4 is going to equal 16. But because I'm talking about area, I need to make sure that I use it as square units. Whew. Okay, 1, 2 times 1, 2, 3. To find the area of the green rectangle, I could use 2 times 3, which would equal 6 square units. Okay, looking at the yellow, 1, 2, 3, 4 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 4 times 7 equals 28 square units. And finally, for the blue, I've got 1, 2 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 times 6 equals 12 square units. Okay, so when it is that rectangle or square, I can use that formula, area equals length times width, and solve it using multiplication, which is easier when you get into larger shapes than counting each individual shape. Okay, so now what would I do for this one? Okay, I could go through and I could count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I could count individual boxes, or because it's a rectangle, I could use that formula, length times width, and I could count 1, 2, 3. Sorry, my 1 didn't show up. Times 1, 2, 3, and 3 times 3 also equals 9, because I'm talking about area, 9 square units. Okay, for my green, 1, 2 times 1, 2, 3, 4 would give me 2 times 4 is 8 square units. For my yellow, 1, 2, 3, 4 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 4 times 5 equals 20, because I'm talking about area, 20 square units. For my blue, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2 times 8 equals 16, because I'm talking about area, 16 square units. Very good. Okay, so nice and easy, right? So let's just make sure that we remember our formula for area that we can use with rectangles and squares. Not if it's that irregular shape, unless we break it into composite shapes, unless we break it into squares and rectangles. Some of you may remember that from class. Okay, but the formula for area for rectangles and squares is going to be area equals length times width. Okay, area equals length times width. Area equals length times width. And you see it shortened this way. A stands for area equals length times width. You're going to be asked to remember that. So make sure that you are committing that formula to memory. So here we have a sample problem. Colleen needs to buy new tiles for her TV room. She must determine the area of her room first. Area is the number of square units needed to cover a shape. A square unit is a square with sides that are each 1 unit long. To find the area of a square or rectangle, we can multiply the length by the width. So here you can see that they have drawn out what the TV room would look like and broken it into its individual square feet. Each square equals 1 square foot. How do I know it's feet? Because it tells me over here on the side it's 5 feet wide. It's 6 feet long. So each individual unit is 1 square foot. I know what the unit is here. So I could go through and I could count each one of these. It's kind of a lot to count though, and so I don't necessarily want to use that. It's a rectangle, so I can use my formula, area equals length times width. So I can multiply my 5 times 6. 5 times 6 equals 30. So the area of the TV room floor is 30 square feet. Okay, you could also call it 30 feet squared. So she'd need to buy 30 of those tiles to cover the inside of the room, the floor of the room, which is the area. And then what I want to draw your attention to here is that there's a couple different ways that you could write that answer. You could write 30 square feet. You could write 30 feet squared. Or the common way you're going to see it is 30 feet. That 2 that's raised up high, kind of like an apostrophe, okay, that means squared. So you could write 30 square feet, or you could write it like this. Is kind of the shorthand way to do it, 30 feet squared. Okay, so remember that's what that means. Now, when we're talking about rectangles and squares, we need to think about the properties of rectangles and squares. A square means that every side is the same length. Okay, that's the definition of a square. There's some more to it also. But to be a square, it has to have the same length on every side. For a rectangle, the opposite sides are going to be equal. So the sides that are across from each other will be the same. So these two will be the same, and these two will be the same. Opposite sides are equal. So you have to remember that when we're working on area, and then again when we're working on perimeter, because they're not going to give you all of the numbers and are going to count on you knowing those properties of squares and rectangles. Okay, so what we're doing is looking at these rectangles. So I notice that this side is a 2, so then I know that this side is a 2. This side is a 5. I know that this side is a 5. Okay, but when I'm using area, I don't even necessarily need to know that because I'm going to use length times width. So 2 times 5 would give me 10. And because I see here that my unit is in inches, my answer for area is going to be in square inches. See, and again, you've got that 2 that's raised up high like an apostrophe. Okay, that means 10 square inches. When I see a 4 here and a 4 here, that tells me that all of my sides are going to be the same, because remember, these are opposite, they're the same. These opposites are the same. So I know that this is a square. All the sides are equal. 4 times 4 equals 16 centimeters squared. Okay, nice and easy. Just remember to use those properties. Okay, 3. I know this one's 3. This is 8. This is 8. But my formula is length times width, so I could do my 3 times 8, which gives me 24 square yards. Okay, that raised up 2. And remember, I could write it square yards. I don't have to use that little symbol if I don't want to. Now look at this one right here. Excuse me. There's only one side labeled. So what do you think that means? If there's only the one side labels, that's telling me they're all the same. And if they're all the same, that's a square. So if I've only got that one side labeled, now I've got 2 and 2 and 2 and 2. But for area, I only need length times width. So I could do 2 times 2, which equals 4 square feet. Okay, don't let these ones trick you. When you see there's only that one side labeled, that tells you it's going to be a square and they're all going to be the same size. Okay, 7 times 2, 14 centimeters squared. And the last, length times width for this rectangle, 3 times 9, 27 square feet. Now you're going to have work exactly like that. Okay, easy cheesy. So to end our time together today, you have a song. This little song is to the tune of Mary Had a Little Lamb, and I apologize in advance for what you were about to hear. Okay, but this can just help you remember. We'll learn one for perimeter as well, and it'll help you get it in your mind if you don't know, if you can't remember, gosh, is it the inside or the outside? Think back to these songs and maybe they will help. Okay, so this is to the tune of Mary Had a Little Lamb, and it goes like this. To figure out the area, the area, the area. To figure out the area, multiply length by width. To figure out the area, the area, the area. To figure out the area, multiply length by width. Good luck. Reach out to your teachers if you need us. We'll talk soon.